Good morning, everyone. I'm the head of campaigns at Transparency International in Berlin. We're a global anti-corruption NGO with offices in over 100 countries. So we have quite a global reach. In many of those countries, our work is. Our operation is quite small, and so as an NGO, we're constantly trying to increase our impact and influence. And one of the ways in which we seek to reach out to people is through our global campaigns. And this morning, I'm going to talk about one of those campaigns, a campaign that we just launched in the last 6 months. It's called Unmask the Corrupt. And what I want to do here is explain a little bit about where it came from. I don't know if I'll meet Annette's criteria for what the best story will be, but it certainly came from a place of wanting to tell a better story about corruption. $2 trillion. That's the estimated amount of money laundered globally in any one year. So I'm going to try to put that in context. So who knows what the GDP of Austria is? Anyone know what GDP is? Okay. I was told that it's about $400 billion, so US dollars. So $2 trillion is 5 times the annual global output of all of Austria, all the work that you all do and everybody in the country does, and all of the output of the country. So 5 times that is laundered globally in any one year. And almost $6 trillion is the amount of money that's been lost from developing countries in illicit financial flows over the last 10 years. So that is money that is either stolen from public treasuries, money that's supposed to be spent on health and education or other public services, or money that's been received in bribes, often from Western countries or from Western companies doing business in developing countries, and that goes back out of the country. So we started to look at this issue and think about how we could possibly address that, because the scale of the problem is so huge that it's a really daunting problem to look at. And what we found is that people were really angry in all of the countries that we worked in about what was happening. They know that corruption is a problem. They know that there are news stories about public officials siphoning off money from public projects. So they were aware and they were really angry about it, but they just didn't think there was anything that they could do about it. And we wondered, what we're supposedly the experts in anti-corruption, what could be done about that? And one of the parts of the story that we identified is that not only is the money stolen in the first place or accepted as a bribe for doing business, and then is it moved out of the country using typically the international financial system, banks, other ways of transferring money. But then the people who've stolen the money use it to fund a lavish lifestyle. They use it to buy luxury yachts or send their children to elite private education and live a luxury lifestyle with money that should be part of the public budget. And that makes people really angry. It's not just they're angry enough that it's been stolen, but then that it's used in this way makes people even more angry. So we developed our campaign out of this idea of that people were really angry and they thought that the thieves, the people who are corrupt and steal money from the public, should be appropriately punished. So we looked at a couple of high-profile cases. James Ibori, who's a former governor of a Delta state in Nigeria, bought a mansion in the UK for £2.2 million in cash. And you can do that. So part of our work is to really close down the ways in which these kinds of transactions can take place, and legally. In Brazil, Paulo Maluf is a congressman in the Brazilian parliament who's wanted by Interpol for money laundering and is known to travel around the world and has bought luxury items in New York, and these are all part of the public record. So we started to tell some of these stories to put pressure, either to bring prosecutions or to put pressure that there be proper investigations in some of these issues. Ben Ali, who's the former dictator of Tunisia, has money in Switzerland, the UK, and Canada that we know of, and money that was stolen from the people. So one of the ways, we basically identified 3 ways that we would try to address this problem. One of the ways is the use of shell companies. So it's very easy to set up an offshore company and then establish a bank account related to that company. You can do it online. It takes about 15 minutes. It doesn't cost very much money. And any of you here can do that perfectly legally, and it's a way of concealing your identity for companies in which you do business, and also concealing the identity of who really holds the money behind that company. So the origin of the campaign really came out of the anger to try to do something about this problem. It's a first campaign in what's part of a bigger initiative against impunity. So what I mentioned at the beginning about where this was coming from within the Transparency International global anti-corruption movement. It's about making sure that there's appropriate punishment, that people shouldn't continue to get away with this kind of corruption. We launched the campaign in 12 countries in the last few months, and we're scaling the campaign to more countries in 2015. We're trying to reduce the cross-border flow of illicit assets. So we're looking at ways like eliminating the use of shell companies, for example, and importantly, their enjoyment by the corrupt abroad. So not just the transfer of the money, but the way that it's used to buy real estate or luxury goods in other countries. So we identified three. This is the policy part. We identified 3 results. We want to have company registers made public, and I'll talk about a little bit of success we've had on that so far, so that everybody knows. So you can't have anonymous companies anymore. Everybody knows who the owners of companies are, that it's not okay for that to be a secret. That we introduce travel bans or try to restrict the corrupt from traveling to other countries to enjoy their assets abroad. And thirdly, to better regulate the sale of luxury goods and real estate, so that appropriate due diligence is done when you buy a house. That it shouldn't be okay to walk into a country with a suitcase full of cash and purchase property with it. At least there should be some basic questions asked. And I like this photo a lot because this is some of the ways that we work in countries around the world. Many of our national organizations work in the communities that they serve. And this is Lupita. Lupita means little magnifying glass. This is a photograph from Peru, and I stuck it in last night because we were having a conversation about Peru. Lupita is a character that our national chapter in Peru developed to illustrate the idea that the public should know what happens to their money, that public budgets should be open and transparent. This is a group of mostly teenagers in Palestine marching to prevent corruption in the public sector. What they're specifically marching about is preventing cronyism, or where you can get a job because you know someone and not because you're qualified for it. And I thought this is important because, as you know, there is a conflict in Palestine. And I think it's really powerful that people are willing to fight for a fight against corruption in their communities in the middle of this crazy and brutal conflict that's ongoing. So the values of having transparency and some kind of justice within the Palestinian government is important as well. This is a community event in Zimbabwe, where our national chapter in Zimbabwe opened a legal advice center. These are centers that we have in about 40 countries around the world, where if you're suspicious that somebody's committed a crime of corruption or is stealing money, that you can go and report it in confidence to a team of lawyers who are often volunteers for Transparency International, and they can advise you whether you should report it to the police or what other steps you could take to reduce corruption in your community. This is much closer to home. This is a volunteer activist in Hungary at a music festival, the Sziget Festival. Probably some of you know because it's a popular festival in Central Europe. So we also outreach with our campaign message to youth audiences and who are very active and as you know from recent politics in Europe, very, very engaged in changing the corrupt nature of our political system and of theft in our public sector. So just to go into a little bit of the mechanics of the campaign from a global perspective, as somebody who has to implement a global campaign in multiple countries. We have to coordinate national and global asks. So what we say we want to change, we have to translate that into policy changes or social changes that are maybe different or slightly different in multiple countries. Generating news media. So when we did a big week of action in September, we generated more than 400 stories in multiple countries. Because we don't have very much money for advertising, so this is just based on media advocacy and local interest in our campaign. We are experimenting. We have obviously a social, like all of you do probably, we have a social media outreach as part of our work, but we're experimenting with different forms of social media, and we tried Thunderclap. I don't know if any of you know that. It's a way where you can, it's a tool where you can time your social media outreach to all happen at the same time. So when we took an action in November, we reached more than 2 million people. So that, we can talk more about that in the break if people are interested in that. And finally, so after a few months of running this campaign, we're already starting to have some success, which is quite encouraging. We, in partnership with other NGOs like Oxfam and Global Witness, we pressured the G20 summit which was in Australia this year, on the issue of corporate transparency, on this issue of anonymous companies. And it's the G20, change doesn't happen overnight, but we've had some success of the G20 as a whole saying, yes, there should be greater scrutiny and transparency of anonymous companies. And yes, there should be greater scrutiny of corrupt individuals who can travel freely with illicit assets. And in the EU, we worked quite hard to pressure the EU to pass a new law, which it's just about to do. There's agreement in the EU that would set up a central registry for companies. So this sounds, quite arcane and obscure, but actually, anonymous companies are used in about 2/3 of grand corruption cases. So it's a big problem. And some people call it the getaway vehicle for corruption. It's the tool that you can use to get away with large corruption. And the EU is about to say that every country should have its own registry of corporate owners, so that people know who owns and controls companies and who can benefit from them. So what happened? And this is where I'm going to finish. This is like an opening lead that only like a policy wonk can love. November 2014 may be remembered as the most significant month to date in the movement to fight the abuse of corruption and tax evasion through the use of anonymous shell companies. For me, that's fantastic, and it's probably quite obscure to most people. But that was like, finally, we're getting the world's leading economies to pay attention to this problem. It's from Newsweek, and the second one is from The Economist about the EU legislation, where The Economist is reporting that corporate secrecy has really shot up the agenda thanks to the work of NGOs. So I think what I wanted to say here is that even with some modest pressure, but getting to the heart of what the problem was and trying to explain to people what the story is behind that problem, is a way that is something that we use when we're developing our campaigns, and I look forward to continuing the conversation throughout the day with all of you about that. So thank you.